Okay, so week 11. Okay, ESL methods. So this, like I said, this is really the history of methods. That's what we're going to be looking at here. A very fast tour. Grammatical, grammar-based approach versus communicative versus cognitive. So on your matrix, you'll notice the columns that you're being asked to fill in. You're going to be able to identify, is it a grammar-based, a cognitive, or a communicative? And so you can just, whatever, you can throw the G, the C, or the cog, the com, or the gram, whatever, however it's going to help you remember. And then understanding what, grammatical, grammar-based is teacher-centered. That's where you're doing the work. Okay? The communicative is student-centered. Obviously, they would have to have a stronger sense of the language. And then cognitive, that's learner-centered, explicit teaching of the learning strategies. So that's, you'll want to be able to identify between those three approaches. So the timeline to the approaches develop pretty closely to some of our sociological, what am I trying to say, theories, I guess. If you've taken a sociology class, as education sort of developed and some of the different sociological ideas developed, this also, the language also changed. So we begin the 1880s, we look at the direct approach, and I'm going to show you some really awkward videos of people doing some of these, just so you can see, and I think you'll find very quickly why they're not effective. Okay. All the way to current, where we're in the cognitive, that's where we want, right, the learner-centered. We want them doing the work. So again, still looking at up here, so the approaches, there's a definition for them. Did you guys catch that? The actual definition's up here. What's the matter? Are you laughing at the...
I started writing it. She's like, it's okay.
Oh yeah, it's on here. So deductive versus inductive, and I'm always and forever the handout queen. I find something I like, I figured you'd like it. So just as a kind of a refresher from your science classes, I'm sure, the difference between inductive versus deductive. From number of observations, a general conclusion is drawn. So you go from specific to less specific, more general. Deductive, from general to specific. Okay. So figuring out, grammar-based is deductive versus communicative, and cognitive both are more inductive. So how you're approaching it is different. And over here, I think this is probably what helps the most. So grammar-based is memorization. That's the easiest way to remember it. You're giving them things to memorize, words to memorize, sounds to memorize. This is more common, if you think about it, when we are teaching foreign language. They do lots of memorization. You do lots of repetitive drills. And it's really important that as teachers of English language learners, we're not teaching them a foreign language. We're trying to teach them a second language. We're immersing them in the second language. So I know we've had teachers who have taught foreign language and then they teach ESL to newcomers because they have that, they're Spanish speakers, so it makes sense that they would be able to teach. But the problem is they bring a lot of their foreign language strategies with them, and they're not utilizing good practices for language learners, which they're still language learners. And do you guys understand the difference of what I'm talking about? Okay. Communicative, interaction, hands-on, nothing wrong with these, but you're expecting if the kids don't have a foundation, and L's don't do well with projects because there's multiple layers of expectations and multiple layers of directions, and you have to have to break it down to scaffold it. So if you're doing a project, you're definitely scaffolding it and you're giving them small, tiny bites at a time. Versus some of these more hands-on projects where you're giving them instruction and you're expecting them to be able to do it. So with your communicative, you're going to take it down to the cognitive level, or up to the cognitive level. And really you're just adding that modeling. I know, especially with the elementary lesson plans that I've seen you guys, lots of modeling. I think we don't do that in high school as much. Or we forget that we have to model every single step for our L's a lot of times. Interaction in the metacognition. Okay? All right, so getting into the approaches. The first approach, and they're not in order. I don't know who made the matrix in the PowerPoint. They're kind of bounce around. Grammar translation. Grammar translation is based on the approach to teaching classical languages. You're giving your instruction in L1, so that means that you do not have to be fluent in L2, which most ESL teachers are not fluent in the L2, especially when you have a wide variety of L2s in your classroom. Now, at North, most of our Ls are Spanish speakers. So if you're a Spanish speaker, it's definitely to your advantage. But when you step up to our transitioning students, we have students who speak Swahili, French. I just looked at the list today. We have 7 languages that we represent here currently at North. It's interesting how much faster all non-Spanish speaking Ls transition quicker than Spanish speakers. Now, if you have a school where you have a small Spanish-speaking group, they will probably transition much quicker too, because they are not becoming dependent on one another to speak and translate for each other. Grammar translation, focus on grammar, little use of L2 for communication, early reading of difficult texts. Oh, hopefully I can make it clear. So in a short, this is what you're going to see your Spanish teachers doing when they're teaching Spanish. This would be, I mean, they're translating. That's typically what they're doing. You're translating the language first, and then you're moving on to more fluency. Direct approach. Oh wait, was there something else? Nope. Okay. Reaction to the failure of grammar translation. We have the direct approach. No use of L1, so the students are not allowed to speak in their native language. Okay? You have conversations with them. I've got a short video we'll watch here, and it's horrible. I can't imagine teaching in this way. Actions and pictures for understanding, which we still do this. I mean, when you're trying to, especially with vocabulary, right? More actions. If I tell a student, okay, clap your hands, and they look at you blankly, what would you do? Clap your hands, clap them, put your hands together, and they're still staring at you. So why wouldn't you just go like this, right? Clap your hands, okay? So we still do use we still do use the direct approach for basic communication, but we're not going to completely cut them off from the L1. Grammar, culture learned inductively. Okay, they're watching you behave, they're watching you act a certain way, and that they're learning what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Text read for pleasure. I like the fact that they did have that. But the teacher has to be fluent in the L2. And again, if you had a Spanish-speaking cohort or group of kids and you had a teacher who had that strength, that would be great. But if you don't, I mean, what about all the other kids in your class, right? All right, so no. Okay, hang on. Sorry, I changed the.
Can you tell me how that word with me? That's the spell that. What am I doing? Writing with your pen. Am I writing with your pen? Am I writing?
Okay.
With both. I'm writing with my pen. I'm speaking with my mouth. What does the word with mean? With? doing? What am I doing? You are writing. Writing.
You're writing.
With your pen. Please, you're writing.
You're writing.
With your
pen.
pen. Very good. Am I writing with your pen? Am I writing with your pen? No. You aren't writing with my pen, but you're writing with your pen. Very good. Once more, please. No, you aren't with, but you're writing with your pen. Very good. Do we read with our eyes? Do we read with our eyes? Yes.
Yes.
We read with our eyes. All right. Very good. Do we speak?
I don't know how, that would, as a language learner, I would feel intimidated with someone who is going, are you, and so you're repeating, and she's already talking over you, and so you can see how this method would be
So is
kind
that
of
like,
scary.
or the approach, is that a grammar-based approach or cognitive or communicative?
Yeah, that would be grammar.
Okay.
She's just teaching the language here, and that's how.
Yeah, they're just repeating what she's
Yeah, I feel
saying.
like I do this a lot during the day with like instructions.
Oh, to get them to follow instructions? Or to
Yeah.
listen to your instructions, so
Like-
you have them repeat the instructions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this like Rosetta Stone or like the Duolingo or whatever, like the apps that you do where they like tell you what to say and you repeat it type of?
More so, but she's doing it in real time.
Yeah.
It's so she's engaging them in a conversation, but she's saying for them what they're going to say. So you're repeating what she says automatically. And so this is for language. They're learning the language. I do it with my directions too. Read the directions with me. Okay, everyone read the directions, and we repeat. You're going to underline this. Da 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 da. You're going to yeah. This makes me nervous watching them do this.
I feel bad for the guy. He doesn't feel like he has an experience to go.
Well, and are you learning anything by repeating just what she says? Some of it's you're learning the cadence and the flow, the fluency of it, but
But you can't see like what word you're connecting it to.
right, exactly. Am I using your pencil?
He's gonna like say that sometime.
You are writing with your pen.
Yeah. And she's teaching them how to use contractions. You aren't. You are writing with your pencil. So again, there's part of it is the fluency, the flow of the language, but I don't know, that one's horrible to me. Audiolingual's not a whole lot better. Okay, so this is the reading approach. And I don't think it's on your sheet. Reaction to, okay, your direct, direct method.
Direct approach. maybe.
Direct approach, yeah. Few traveled, reading valuable, few fluent. Teachers, vocabulary control. So you're going to back to like how we learn Spanish, how we learn foreign languages here today. Still, we're still using these similar approaches to learn this method. The thing that you have to keep in mind is the expectation is someone who's learning a second language in high school is literate, for all intents and purposes, in their own language. So you have a foundation to build on. You have the ability. You can infer, I guess, that someone already has a grammatical base, a vocabulary base. They have this base to build on. When we're teaching our L's, they don't have, a lot of them are not literate in their own language, so they don't have the foundation to build on. So you're really immersing them we have to immerse them in this language, in their L2. And this is not immersion, right? This is a lot of writing. And it's dependent on them being able to make the connections beyond the vocabulary. So you give them the vocabulary that they're using, or they're direct translating, but they're on the flip side, they're not gaining the fluency, when you make the sounds, inflections, the correct inflections. Audiolingual approach. Okay. As structural linguistics and behavioral psychology. We'll watch a short video of this guy doing as well. Begin lessons with dialogues. So this is moving more towards, what do we call, the humanistic, where you're almost putting them into real life situations, or you're creating real life situations for them to have conversations about. Mimicry and memorization to form habits. So he's going to practice a conversation for them, and then they're going to practice the same conversation. Okay, so they're mimicking you, whatever it is that you're doing. To a certain extent, we do have some things that we want to do this with our kids, because there are certain words. We were talking about what were we talking about the other day? My kids, and I said you could pronounce it this way or this way, and now I can't remember what the word was.
Oh, we just had one like that in 5th grade.
I can't for the life
Ours
of me.
was hostile or hostile.
Okay, yeah,
We talked about how that can be said.
it means the same thing.
Yeah. And it
Data,
really
data.
threw them for a loop. So.
Or throw them for a real big loop and start talking about resumes. Or resume.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Grammatical structure, sequential and inductive. Okay, so we're still moving general, getting big, right? Skill order, you listen first. So you're sitting and listening, which I think is so hard without context if you don't know what they're talking about. What am I listening to? You can talk to me all day long. You can stand up for me and say something and I can repeat it. I still don't know what it is because I have no context, right? So you're going to listen, and then they repeat, speak, and then you have them writing, reading and writing. So, and I don't know what the perfect combination or order for that. Works a lot on pronunciation, saying the words correctly. But think about it. I know, as an adult, even when the kids correct me on a pronunciation, I still kind of get that like yucky feeling of not doing it right, even though I'm an adult, right? You say it, and they're like, "Miss, you're saying it wrong," and so they correct you, and you're like, "Oh, I thought I'm not saying it wrong." Okay.
I went off on my kids one day. I said, I don't make fun of you for not saying every
Exactly.
word in English correct.
Yeah.
And they were like,
And-
oh, I guess that's right.
And that's something that they need to be aware of.
Yeah.
And they'll giggle when I say things, you know. And I know I don't use the correct verb tense, you know, when I say escribe,
roll my
right?
R's.
Escribe, and they're like, it's escribe. Okay. Again, I don't, and we're going to talk about an approach that addresses that. The idea under the audiolingual approach is that they're making very few errors. So you're correcting them and correcting them and correcting them until they say it exactly correct. Practice without meaning or context. Again, this I would struggle with. What am I saying? Why is it important? Okay, let's see my video. I opened one, but I don't know if it's, yeah. So I gotta go back and open my. And please don't judge the video, because I think it was made in like 1980.
Today the salesman is a vacuum cleaner salesman, and the other person, here's the vacuum cleaner salesman, and let me...
So he is giving some context, but I mean, could you imagine having a
The other
conversation
person
about that?
is a woman, or we could call her a housewife. So now, I want you to just listen and watch what I do. Listen carefully, watch what I do, and try to understand, okay? Now, I'm the salesman now, okay? I'm going to be both people. I'm going to play two roles. I'm going to be the salesman and the woman. Okay. Ring, 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 ring. Ring, 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 ring. Now, the woman. Hello? Hello, madam. Would you like to have the cleanest house in town? Yes, of course I would. Then, madam, you need the amazing Hoover vacuum cleaner. No, I don't. Salesman. What? Why not? Because my husband does the cleaning in our house. Oh. Okay, now listen and I'll do it one more time. You just listen and don't talk this time. Listen again, I'll do it one more time. The cleanest house in town.
The cleanest house in town.
Okay, now just you. The cleanest house in town.
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 Cleanest.
Cleanest.
The cleanest house in town.
The cleanest house in town.
Good, very good. Okay.
So is that important? Cleanest? I mean, you want to say it correctly, but the focus is not on what I think is important. So this is audiolingual. Okay. Okay. Affective humanistic approach. It's also called suggestopedia. Okay, suggestopedia. This is spring 8. All right, reaction to audio, lingual, and does that mean? Is that somebody else? Okay, I was like something beeping. And cognitive approach.
It's cognitive?
It's cognitive because the teacher is a facilitator, right?
It is.
Or is it still for?
This is actually communicative. Because the focus is on the meaning, language acquisition.
There it is, the meaningfulness, right?
I would almost say it's still grammar based, but yeah, because you're still drill and practice. But
So it's probably a mix of both, grammar
Yeah.
and communicative.
and you can always, I'm pretty sure this other handout that I gave you gives you also more information. It's not going to just necessarily come right out and tell you. But yeah, communication of his meaning to the learner, meaningful to the learner. So they're giving you, because what happens if a door-to-door salesman comes to your house? You will now be prepared to not buy the vacuum, I guess. L2